The moment I knew my husband was cheating, he was moving at 12 knots. Find My Friends doesn't show speed, just a blue dot. But the blue dot slid across a stretch of water with a pace no human foot can match, carving a clean line toward open sea. Caleb had told me he was in Charlotte for a conference about urban resilience, which is hilarious when you're watching your marriage drown in real time. I pinched the map wider. The dot tracked along the inlet past the breakwater, cleared the jetty, swung southeast, a breadcrumb trail of motion, too smooth to be a car, too constant to be a layup I could ignore. I switched to satellite view. The blue of the Atlantic looked less like water and more like a choice. People think betrayal arrives like a slap. Mine showed up as a speed I couldn't explain. Caleb is a civil engineer. He wears safety vests like other men wear ties. He builds bridges and then stares at them, from odd angles the way painters stare at hands. We met at a fundraiser where they served shrimp skewers and optimism. He told me a joke about culverts that made me laugh too loud, unreasonably, in public. We married in a courthouse with a judge who winked. We honeymooned in a state park because the cabins were half off. We're the kind of people who make lists on index cards and tape them inside the pantry. 6 months ago, he bought a book about sailing. Not the coffee table kind, dense pages. Diagrams of rigging, the geometry of wind. For a project, he said, and I nodded. Because men like Caleb always have projects. Then came the gear. Deck shoes that never touched our deck. A multi-tool with unfamiliar blades. A coil of rope he called line. He watched videos at night, men with weathered faces and steady voices, explaining how to read tide tables, how to reef a main, how to point into the wind and let the boat do the choosing. I didn't know you liked boats, I said once, half-asleep, comma. I like systems, he said. Boats are systems that admit they're at the mercy of bigger systems. That sounded like poetry coming from him. I kissed his shoulder and let it be a personality. Quirked the way you let your spouse have 3 different hammers. But now the blue dot was gliding past the channel marker labeled 5A, and my thumb had never shaken this much over a satellite photo. I called him. It rang, then kicked to voicemail. I typed, "How's Charlotte?" and watched the message turn green. The way lies turn colors when they're not passing through the towers they promised. A minute later, busy day. Panels went long. You? Home, I typed, deleting and retyping the word twice, as if the repetition might fix geography. When you've lived with a person long enough, you know the shape of their sentences. Caleb's text had the wrong hips. Too careful. Too immediate. My husband is a man who drafts, even on a phone. Haste doesn't look good on him. I opened my laptop and typed IS vessel tracking near Hatteras into the search bar. IS automatic identification system was something I'd learned it about from a podcast episode I listened to once while cleaning behind the fridge. Ships broadcast their position, course, speed. They tell on themselves because the ocean is too big for guesswork. A map populated triangles inching along like polite ants. I zoomed until I could smell salt. There. A triangle off our inlet, doing 12 knots southeast. I clicked. Second wind. Length, 34 feet. Destination. Inlet. Owner. Blue Meridian LLC. I kept clicking until the site told me to subscribe. I did. $60 to know whether my marriage was a boat. Blue Meridian LLC had a mailing address 3 blocks from our house and a registered agent whose name I recognized. My husband's friend Ethan, who knows legal things and loves to say so. My heart did an odd thing. It didn't sprint. It didn't break. It rearranged the furniture to make space for something I didn't invite. I pulled our file box from under the bedware. It should be and thumbed to be Blue Meridian LLC, Articles of Organization, dated 2 months ago, signed by Ethan, member, manager, Caleb Ross, purpose, vessel ownership and charter management. Charter, the word made my mouth taste like aluminum. I grabbed keys, scribbled a note for the dog that said back soon out of habit, and drove to the marina with the kind of focus you only get when the part of you that wants to scream has been sedated by asphalt lines. Marinas have their own weather. The smell of diesel and sunblock, ropes slapping masts in light percussion, gulls with opinions. The dockmaster wore a hat that remembered better hats. I put on the smile women put on for men who guard gates. "Hi," I said. "I need to check on a mooring line for my husband's boat." "What slip?" he asked, not looking up. Second wind. The dock. Slip 21. He pointed without pointing. Slip B21 held a 34-foot Catalina, with the name painted on the transom in a font that wanted you to admire its optimism. Second wind. The hull was scrubbed, the stainless polished. A blue mainsail cover snugged the boom like a blanket on a small child. It looked like a boat that liked itself. I stepped onto the dock and thought, absurdly, about how my shoes weren't the right shoes for this. The deck shoes in our closet had never touched our deck. Now I was walking onto a deck that had touched my life without asking. A woman in a red foul-weather jacket popped up from the companionway like a punctuation mark. She had dark hair and a knot that meant business and a face you'd trust in a storm. "Can I help you?" she asked. I froze. She was not the recording in my head. That voice belonged to someone else. Someone I hadn't met and hoped was imaginary. This woman's voice could tell you. Sorry, I managed. "I'm looking for Caleb Ross." "He's not here," she said, which was both impossible and true. My phone showed his dot moving at 12 knots toward the horizon. "He took her out this morning." "Who are you?" "Nina," I said. "Nina Ross, his wife." The woman's eyebrows did a small, human thing surprise, apology, math. "I'm Lena," she said after a beat. "Caleb's friend. We co-own her." She patted the lifeline like a dog. "I handle charters, mostly." Charters, the word again, with a different temperature. "So it's a business," I said. "To Bright. It's a boat," she corrected, gently. "The business part is what you say to the IRS. "Is he alone?" I asked. The question tripped on its shoelaces. "Not today," she said, and waited to see how careful she needed to be. "He's taking a client." Copper climbed into my mouth and sat down. "Everything okay?" she asked. "You look like it isn't." "I thought he was in Charlotte." Lena's eyes shifted toward the channel, as if openness could substitute for pity. "No," she said. "He's not." A pelican dove and missed. We watched it shake off failure with the practiced insult of a bird that does not negotiate with gravity. "I need to look below," I said. "Sorry," she said. "Insurance. Owners only." "I am an owner," I said, softly, evenly. "Of him?" She weighed it. She made a choice. 5 minutes, she said. "Don't break anything." The cabin smelled like lemon oil and ambition. The galley gleamed. A blue enamel kettle perched on a fiddled stove. The chart table held a laminated chart with grease pencil lines, arcing toward barrier. Islands in loops that made sense if you'd learned how to read them under a patient YouTuber. A logbook lay open, in Caleb's impossibly neat block letters. Date. Wind. Crew. Destination. Under crew for today. C+R. C+R. I felt the floor tip. "My name is Nina. His is Caleb. R is not me." Next to the logbook, a thin folder labeled float plan. Inside, copies of emailed float plans to Lena, each listing departure, route, ETA, and emergency contacts. Emergency contact, Ethan work, Nina home. Crew initialed. Most showed just C. 3 showed C+R. I slid the top sheet into my bag and closed the folder too quickly. A pen rolled. I caught it the way you catch a falling idea. My hands knew how to touch paper more than they knew how to touch rage. On a shelf above the quarter berth, a paperback lay face down. Weather predictability for small craft. A receipt served as a bookmark. The receipt was from Pine and Steamer Coffee Shop. 2 lattes and a blueberry muffin. The day Caleb had told me he was late at the office. I put everything back, imperfectly. People who live double lives develop a librarian's sense for MIS shelved volumes. I didn't want to send a breadcrumb too early. On deck, Lena watched me with the quiet patience of someone who knows this job has other duties. "Did you know I existed?" I asked her. "Yes," she said. "He talks about you like a person talks about a river they love living near and never plan to cross." "That's lyrical," I said, and it landed like an insult in my mouth even if she hadn't meant it as one. She shrugged. "Sailors talk pretty because wind doesn't." "How long have you two?" I managed, then stopped. "We co-own her since April," she said. "We sail more than that. We talk." Everyone underestimates the intimacy of weather. The jealousy that rose wasn't tidy or noble. It wasn't even entirely about the body. It was about the language. Boats had given him a lexicon he hadn't offered me. "Who is our?" I asked, because sometimes the most dangerous question is a small, accurate one. She didn't answer. She looked toward the inlet where boats become small, then lines, then nothing. "You should talk to him, not to me," she said. "I will," I said, already saving the map screenshots, the eyes printouts, the LLC documents into a folder labeled Tides. At home, the dog pressed his head into my thigh and inhaled my day like a drug. I fed him and fed myself mechanically. The app showed the dot meandering near a series of shallow anchorages people on forums call elephant graveyards for weekend sailors. At 5:27 p.m., the dot began its return. At 7:02, it paused at the fuel dock. At 7:38, it stopped at B21. At 8:11, a text, "Charlotte dragging. Might stay one more night." I stared at the screen and felt the thin thrill of an ugly kind of power. People in love want to be surprised. People betrayed want to be right. At 9:03 p.m., I drove back to the marina. Caleb was on deck, coiling line the way he coils thoughts. Alone. The boat rocked in a rhythm that offended me who gave it permission to be peaceful. Charlotte looks wet, I said from the dock. He startled, then smiled, just slow. Nina. Hey, what are you? You're leaking, I said, and realized it was true. A tiny dribble at the stern where a hose coupler had loosened. It wasn't the leak I meant. He knew which one I meant. How did you? Blue Meridian LLC, I said. Articles of organization under our bed. He tried on two expressions like ties, discarded both, went with honesty in a size he thought would fit. I was going to tell you, he said. There are so many sentences I will never have to say, I said. That's not one of them. I thought if I told you about the boat without telling you about why the boat. He scrubbed a hand over his face. I didn't want the why. The why, I said. Is that because letters look better than bodies on forms? He looked past me into the dark, where the channel markers blinked their dumb algorithm of safety. I wanted a place where I didn't have to be a good man with timelines, he said. On a boat you can blame weather. And our blame's the moon, I said. Who is she? He didn't answer. His silence was a shape I recognized, the kind you place over truth like a bull. She's someone I knew a long time ago, he said finally, before us. He was lying. Not about before us. About long time. The last for float plans were this month. Does she know I exist? I asked. He nodded once. Yes. The smallest truths feel like condescension when they arrive late. I went below, I said. I took a copy of a float plan. His jaw tightened. That's theft. This is burglary, I said, jabbing a finger at the neat little cockpit. The blue kettle, the entire second life. It's not a second life, he said, softly. It's a better version of the only one I have. I wanted to be good at something that doesn't require apologies. Then you chose the wrong sport, I said. Sailing is 90% apologies to physics. We stared at each other like we'd met at a party where we'd both been misintroduced. Why not divorce? I asked, flat. If you wanted wind, why not ask for wind? He swallowed. Because I wanted you, he said. And I wanted wind. I thought I could be the man who deserves both by building a machine that hides the math. An LLC, I said. A story, he said. Stories have readers, I said. I'm the reader you forgot. Lena's cabin light flicked on behind him, then off. She was giving us privacy by not existing. I hated her for it and loved her more. Come home, I said, surprising myself. Tonight. What would that change? He asked, weary. Nothing, I said, except the part where I say I tried. He stared over my shoulder, as if the parking lot offered counsel. Tomorrow, he said. I need to hose down. Close up. Tomorrow, I repeated, and the word sounded like a weak plank. At home, the dog leaned his entire weight into me the way creatures do when they want to make sure you know gravity is still a friend. I opened my laptop and made a new spreadsheet because that's what I do when sensation threatens action. Columns, date, vessel track, float plane crew. Caleb's location texts, discrepancies. Under a column I titled language, I started recording his words. Not for the court but for myself. I wanted a place where I didn't have to be a good man with timelines. On a boat you can blame weather. I needed commas to pin him to the page. At midnight, an email arrived from Blue Meridian LLC, subject, charter confirmation, Saturday. Body, we're delighted to confirm your half-day sale for our Calder Plus guest. Weather permitting, we'll depart 9 a.m. Please wear non-marking shoes. Guest, the metadata listed the sender as Lena. The reply to was an address I didn't recognize. I forwarded it to a burner email and deleted the original, hands steady even as my chest tried to stage a coup. Calder, had a last name. My body, ridiculous instrument that it is, reacted less to the affair than to the syntax. Women know what it means to go from initial to surname. It means the story has longer legs than you hoped. I searched the county records. Calder returned 6 hits. A property deed to a bungalow 3 blocks from the marina. Owner, Rowan Calder, age, 31. Occupation, reading specialist at the elementary school, if the PTA newsletter could be trusted. I pictured a line of small chairs and a woman with the kind of patience that gets misread as permission. The next morning, I walked by 11 Willow, a house painted a shade of optimistic green. A bike leaned against the porch, its basket overflowing with library books. A pair of deck shoes sat by the mat. Women who leave their shoes outside believe in hope and hygiene. I put a note under the mat. It said only my name and a phone number. It did not say wife because there are rooms you enter without shouting. At 10:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text. I don't want to be the villain in your story. Can we talk? I wrote back, you already are, but yes. We met at the water, where people confess things because waves look like absolution. Rowan wore a navy raincoat and a face that belonged to someone who has volunteered to herd first graders into and out of boots. She looked at the boats the way some people look at mountains, not with awe, but with the weary affection of someone who has been taught that beauty is a job. I didn't know about you, she said before I asked. Then I did. Then I didn't know what to do with that knowledge. How long? I asked. 4 months, she said. We met at a fundraiser for the literacy lab. He donated books. He brought a model of a pedestrian bridge and told the kids it was like a sentence. It had a subject and a predicate and the load had to be carried without breaking. That's a good line, I said, automatically. He has so many good lines, she said, with a kind of tenderness I have not yet learned to hate. Did he tell you about the boat immediately? He told me about wind, she said. He told me he hadn't felt like himself in years and that the ocean had more room for him. I did not ask if she had room for him too. I already knew the answer. People build rooms out of their own bodies when asked politely by a man who loves his own metaphor. I thought he was separated, she said. Then he told me you were not well. I'm ashamed of how quickly I believed that. I think women are told to be kind so much we mistake it for charity. I am not well, I said, but not in the way he meant. She smiled, small. I'm sorry. I'm sorry too, I said, and meant it, confusingly, for both of us. We watched a sailboat tack clumsily near the mouth of the inlet, its boom swinging like a careless elbow. Do you love him? I asked, because sometimes what we need to know is not legal. I love who I get to be when he looks at me, she said. That's not the same thing. It feels the same until the receipts arrive, I said. She nodded. What now? I don't know, I said. But on Saturday you have a charter. Do not go. She laughed once, incredulous. I booked that months ago. It's his birthday surprise. Don't go, I repeated. The only surprise he deserves is weather. She looked down at her hands, pale at the knuckles. Okay. When I got home, Caleb was at the table with his laptop and the posture of a man attempting casual. He closed the screen like a child guilty of cartoons. Charlotte, I said. He didn't pretend. I'll get a hotel tonight, he said. We can talk Sunday. You can shower here, I said. Weary, the towels don't know what you've done. Thank you, he said. And the gratitude scraped me raw. We didn't talk that night. He took the couch. I lay in our bed and read 3 paragraphs of a book 5 times and retained none of it. At 2 a.m., he came into the bedroom doorway like a teenager caught sneaking in. I'll end it, he said. You'll have to be specific, I said into the dark. The boat, he whispered. And the boat, I said. Sell your myth. Lena can buy me out, he said, voice breaking. I can't do this to you. You already did, I said. But yes, sell your myth. He left before dawn. The house held its breath. I texted Lena. I'm sorry your business partner is a man, she replied. Boats forgive stupidity. People don't. Then, you okay? I wrote. No, she wrote. Me neither. Saturday bloomed warm and wrong. At 8:52, I showed second wind leaving the slip with 2 aboard. My throat clenched. I texted Rowan. You promised. No reply. At 9:10, a message from an unknown number. He said it was work. I am not there. My phone buzzed again. Eyes alert. Distress. Second wind's eye switched to a code I did not want to see at breakfast. I ran out of the house with my shoes not tied. At the marina, a cluster of men had formed around the mast of rumor. They hit a deadhead, someone said, took on water, engine died, sailed themselves stupid. The Coast Guard cutters wake knifed across the inlet toward the blinking triangle. I watched through a pair of binoculars a stranger offered with the ceremony of a chalice. Second wine wallowed, mainsail flogging, ballon, a figure in a red jacket at the tiller. Another on the foredeck hauling the line with a frantic grace that made my heart break in a new direction. It wasn't Rowan, it wasn't Lena, it was Caleb and a man I didn't recognize. At 10:01, the cutter pulled alongside. A line flew, men yelled. The boat steadied. The mainsail came down with the reluctant dignity of a curtain closing. At 10:23, second wind limped into the marina under tow. Caleb's face was the color of paperwork. The man in the red jacket, Ethan, I realized, of the LLC and law school swagger, jumped onto the dock and immediately slipped, catching himself on a cleat with a curse so sincere it sounded like prayer. "Deadhead," the dockmaster called. Plug popped at the washdown, Ethan panted. "We were siphoning hope." "Where's your crew?" someone yelled. Caleb looked at me like a person who has spotted shore after swimming too long. "Cancelled," he said, and in his mouth the truth was an apology for its lateness. Lena materialized with a wrench and a competence that made me want to confess things. She barked orders. The man obeyed. The boat breathed like a creature that had been forgiven. I stood there, hands cold, and realized I wasn't jealous of the other women anymore. I was jealous of the boat. The boat had gotten his best self, the self that asks for help, the self that admits error, the self that allows the world to be bigger than he is without calling it a personal insult. At noon, I went home and put the plant that lives on our sill onto the table. I stared at it until I could name its green without crying. Then I did the only dangerous thing I hadn't done yet. I wrote a letter to Rowan. It said, "He doesn't want a wife. He wants weather. Weather forgives everyone eventually. People shouldn't." And then I wrote a letter to myself. It said, "You are not a port. You are a coastline. This is not the same thing." I taped the second letter to the inside of the pantry door, where we keep the index cards. On Sunday morning, Caleb walked into the kitchen with a look that once would have worked. "I'll list the boat," he said. "I'll dissolve the LLC. You'll sit," I said. And he did. Obedient as a sailor when the wind goes slack. "I loved you the whole time," he said. "I didn't stop." "I believe you," I said. "And I don't forgive you." He swallowed. "Is there a difference?" "There is for me," I said. "Forgiveness is a ceremony. Belief is a fact. I can't host your ceremony for you." He looked at the pantry door like it might adjudicate. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "we talk about the part that was harder to hide than are the money." He closed his eyes. The color drained from his face like a bad engine finally giving up. "You saw the transfers," he said. "I saw Blue Meridian buying hope with our savings," I said. "I saw you pay for an engine from an account we created to try for a baby we didn't get." He put his head in his hands. "I told myself the boat would become the thing that saved us," he said. "I told myself if I could become wine competent, I could be life competent." "And did you?" "No," he said. "I drowned smarter." He lifted his head and I saw, finally, not a villain, not a sailor, not even a husband. A man who had built a machine to manage his feelings and then called it a vessel because that sounded noble. "I'm filing," I said. He nodded like the ocean nods a motion that acknowledges and defies. "I'll sign," he said. Outside, the wind shifted. The maple in our yard showed a lighter green under its leaves, the way trees do when they want you to know something's changing. This is not a story with a storm. The weather had done its job. The secret wasn't a lightning strike. It was the tide, returning, predictable if you know where to look. I closed my laptop and called a lawyer. Then I called Rowan. Then I called my mother. Then I called Lena. The four of us made a list, because that is what women do when a system fails. We write its replacement on paper and stick it in a pantry. When I hung up, I deleted the tracking apps from my phone. I stood in my kitchen and looked at the index cards and the plant, and the way light chose the table even in late afternoon. I picked up a pen and started a new list. The first item was short and unpoetic and harder than it looked. "Do not become weather for anyone." Caleb signed the initial divorce petition on a Tuesday that insisted on being sunny. Tasha warned me that sunshine makes people nostalgic. "He'll try for a speech," she said. "When that happens, ask for numbers." Numbers arrived like offended geese. The forensic accountant traced $42,870 from our future family savings into Blue Meridian's engine fund and slip fees. Another $9,200 in MISC. Outfitting that turned out to be sales and a top-tier autopilot. He'd also personally guaranteed a small business loan by forging my signature. Worse, he'd initialed each page with my careful little J like he'd practiced it in a mirror. Fraud belongs to court, betrayal belongs to kitchens. I stood in both rooms at once. I told Rowan. We sat on her porch while a storm rehearsed out past the river. She had a stack of decodable readers on her lap. She traced the cover of one with a thumb, absent-minded, the way you do when you're learning to let go of something else. "He said the boat would balance his head," she said softly. "He said you didn't understand that part of him." "I understood," I said. "I just didn't bow to it." She nodded like a student who's found the trick of a word. Do you want me to testify? I want you to live in a world where your testimony isn't a hobby, I said, and we both smiled despite ourselves. Ethan texted me a single line. I'm done covering. We met in a coffee shop that had survived 4 owners and 1 flood. He looked like a man who had finally found the bottom of a long, exhausting lie. He tried to transfer the LLC to a shell yesterday, he said. Backdated. I refused. Thank you, I said, and meant it. He's not evil, Ethan said, more to himself than to me. I stopped auditioning for his innocence, I said gently. You can, too. Mediation was an exercise in kinetic politeness. The mediator, with his gentle eyebrows and tie patterned with scales, opened his notebook like a hymn. Caleb did the speech Tasha predicted. The boat was the only thing that made me feel like I could breathe. I never stopped loving you. I lost myself. Find yourself with a therapist, Tasha said, not unkindly. We're here about asset division and restitution. He offered to sell his truck, liquidate a retirement account, pay me back over time. And the boat? The mediator asked. Caleb looked down, as if the table had become an altar. It's a business, he said. Lena depends on it. Lena had sent me her own ledger, invoices, insurance, the one client who tipped in exact change and wet thanks. It wasn't much of a business. It was something holier and more foolish, a project that had meant a future. She agreed to testify to the finances. I'll tell the truth, she texted me. Not to wound him, to stop the weather report. At the temporary orders hearing, the judge listened the way carpenters look at angles and load-bearing points. Tasha presented the forged guarantee, the transfers from the baby fund, the eyes tracks folded against float plans with C+ are circled. Ben's lawyer tried to claim the letters were crew abbreviations, then wilted when Lena explained how charter logs work. Caleb kept swallowing like a man assigned to hard food. The judge froze the boat, pending final division. No sale, no transfer, no damage, he said. It sits. Caleb exhaled audibly, relief and grief braided. I felt nothing, then too much. Outside, Rowan touched the rail along the courthouse ramp the way a person thanks infrastructure. Do you wish it would just sink? She asked. No, I said. I don't want the ocean to clean up our mess. I want paper too. We set disclosure deadlines. We set a trial date. I went home to an apartment that had learned my name. I cooked a pot of onions slowly until they sweetened without burning, because some nights you practice patience on vegetables. 2 weeks before trial, Caleb asked to meet. The park, he texted. I chose a bench under a live oak that makes everyone look honest. He arrived with a folder and a face that had been an apology for days. I listed the boat, he said. Private beer. Above market. It pays everything and leaves you whole. You can't sell, I said. The order. He slid me a sheet with an earnest logo. Letter of intent. Blue Meridian to Horizon Harbor Adventures. They'll hold funds in escrow until the court releases it. Who are they? I asked. A charter outfit down the coast. Who owns them? I said. He hesitated 1 beat too long. My cousin's husband. I slid the letter back. No. How long do you intend to punish me? He asked. And there it was, the tiny, residual entitlement to my patience. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm negotiating with reality. He stared at the tree canopy as if shade could answer. Sometimes I think you love your lists more than you loved me, he said softly. Lists obey, I said. Trial landed like a nail in lumber. The lawyer who had once called my echo a misconfiguration now called my spreadsheets meticulous to the point of obsession, as if the skill I used to survive were a crime of style. Tasha introduced the forged guarantee gently. The judge's eyebrows did an unmistakable thing. Lena testified with the steadiness of someone who has unfriended romance but kept competence. Ethan admitted the shell attempt, then said into the microphone, I'm sorry, and looked at me like the words were both too small and exactly right. Rowan didn't have to take the stand. Tasha used her affidavit instead. It reads like a teacher wrote it. Simple sentences, all the verbs first. Caleb, when called, didn't perform. I loved the boat more than my marriage, he said. Because it didn't ask me to be the husband I promised to be. The honesty knocked the wind out of me and then gave it back. The judge divided, restitution plus attorney's fees. The boat to be sold at a judicial sale, proceeds to satisfy the judgment, any remainder to Blue Meridian. He set the sale for a month out. He looked at Caleb and said, Sir, the ocean forgives nothing the way you want it to. On the courthouse steps, a reporter asked whether I believed in redemption. I said, I believe in receipts. The month rinsed by. Caleb moved into a little rental with a patch of yard where grass resists instruction. Rowan went back to shepherding consonants. Lena put more charters on the calendar like a person who refuses to stop staking out the day after. I learned the names of the women at the bodega on my corner and the way the evening light made my living room look like kindness. The night before the sale, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a photo of the boat's transom. A shadow of the letter's second wind, the paint scuffed where someone had started to peel and then stopped. The caption, "Bad luck to rename before she's yours." Oh. I wrote back, "I'm not superstitious." She replied, "I am, but only about people. Judicial sales are not nautical. They happen in rooms that smell like toner." Still, when the clerk read 34-foot Catalina, her tackle, apparel, and appurtenances, I felt the Atlantic mutter somewhere in the plumbing. Two bidders showed, a man in a blazer who said RO like a unit of measurement, and a woman in a yellow raincoat who kept her hood up inside as if to keep her hope from evaporating. "Lena." She nodded once at me. Rowan slipped in at the last minute, hair damp, clutching an envelope that looked like it contained all the favors she'd ever been owed. The blazer started at $20,000 like he was ordering a drink. The clerk rattled numbers, 30, 32, 35. He smiled like someone who liked to win on paper. 36, Lena said, voice level. 40, the man said, bored. I lifted my bidder card. 41, heads turned. Tasha didn't, because she had known. We had spent the week structuring a thing with a nonprofit that gets kids on boats to learn patience and weather and the difference between fear and data. The plan was not revenge, it was a small, correct use of a hull. 45, the man said, irritated now. 46, Rowan said, and the clerk blinked at the sound of a reading specialist choosing numbers like nouns. The man glared. 50, Lena didn't flinch. 51, he sighed theatrically. 55, I lifted my card. 56, he laughed. You three planned this. We planned to stop losing, I said. He consulted his phone like a talisman. 60, Tasha touched my wrist. I nodded. 61, he stared at me, at the hood, at the woman in the yellow coat. At the math, he dropped his card. Not worth the hassle, he said, and left. Going once, the clerk said. Caleb stepped into the room then, late, hair wet from a rain that hadn't started yet. He took in the scene, the three of us, the number on the board, the absence of a blazer, and understood. He looked at me for permission he did not own. I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. I did the only true thing. Nothing. Going twice, the clerk said. Caleb lifted his hand. 62. The clerk startled. Sir, do you have cashier's funds? Caleb looked at Ethan, who shook his head minutely. The accounts were frozen, the loan in arrears, the cousin's husband not returning calls. He lowered his hand. Sold, the clerk said. To bidder. 11. My card. Rowan exhaled. Lena closed her eyes once like a wave had gone through her and chosen not to take her down. We signed papers. We arranged the transfer with the sheriff and the marina. We did admin the way other people do champagne. Caleb stopped me by the stairwell. You're going to keep her? He asked, disbelief and grief getting a long pearly in his throat. We're going to use her, I said. For what? He asked, resentful and maybe a little hopeful. For teaching kids to triangulate, I said. On water. In life. For taking women out who have been told their value depends on who's at the helm. For quiet. He swallowed. You hate her. I hated your myth, I said. Boats don't lie. People do. He stepped back so I could pass. Do you have to rename? He asked, almost shy. It's bad luck. We do, I said. For good luck. We peeled the letters off the transom in our driveway because ceremony is a real technology. Alina did the first SROW and did the last D. I did the rest. We sanded and painted a clean field. We chose a new name together, not a pun, not a boast. A simple thing, 3 lights. At dusk, we performed the renaming ritual we'd found on a forum where superstition and seamanship drink like sisters. Rowan read the words, clear and teacherly. Lena broke the cheap champagne on the bow with the tenderness of a benediction. I dropped the scrapings of the old letters into a recycling bin because the river didn't deserve our reruns. We took her out on a day with a civilized breeze. No heroics. No 12 knots to the horizon. 5 knots on a beam reach, the kind of sailing that convinces your nervous system it was built correctly. Rowan took the tiller with the concentration of a person learning to write in the new language. Lena trimmed the main and watched the leech like a hawk. I sat by the shrouds and listened to the small sounds, the hiss of water, the creak of line, 3 women making a thing move in a straight, honest line. Near the mouth of the inlet, we tacked and headed home. A small day, a good day. On the way in, we passed Caleb on the bluff above the marina. He stood with his hands in his pockets, watching. He lifted one hand in a gesture that wasn't quite a wave. I lifted mine exactly that far. Then the channel marker took him out of frame. We wrote a syllabus for the kids: how to read a forecast, how to tie a bowline, how to decide if fear is data or drama. We wrote a scholarship in the name of the baby, fund that had bought an engine. We converted what tried to be a boat's heart into a classroom's. On a Tuesday in June, a girl named Esme stood on the foredeck with both feet braced and said, "I didn't know I could make wind into a plan." On a Thursday in July, a woman my mother's age cried quiet tears when she took the helm for the first time. On a Saturday in August, Lena taught for teenage boys to coil line without turning it into contempt. Sometimes Rowan and I walk the docks at dusk and talk about verbs. She likes hold. I like bear. Lena says both are fine as long as you don't try to do them alone. A month after the sale, I found an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside, a single index card, like the ones in our pantry. Caleb's handwriting. I didn't deserve more than one wind. I'm sorry. I put it in a folder labeled archive, because I'm done making alters. The i's app on my phone stays deleted. The only tracking I do now is of weather windows and my own appetite for light. Some evenings Joel joins us. He brings a chilled melon and a listening posture. He never stands at the helm uninvited. He asks if he can learn to tie a cleat hitch. I show him, then step away to let him do the second one himself. We are all practicing new knots. When I wake before dawn, I sometimes hear the old phantom speed. 12 knots across an inlet toward an explanation that refused to arrive. Then I hear the new sound. A kettle on a stovetop, water going honest. A deck creaking under a weight it was made to carry. If you're waiting for the storm scene, we don't have one. Not because the weather was kind, but because we stopped using it as an alibi. The twist wasn't a lightning strike. It was a bill of sale and 3 signatures on a transom. It was a boat that used to be a lie becoming a classroom. It was not revenge. It was governance. You want a moral? I have provisions instead. Rename what harmed you. Keep the parts that float. Teach someone else the chart. And if you need a single sentence to tape inside a pantry when you're tempted to become weather for someone else, you can borrow mine until you write your own. I am not a port. I am a coastline. We sailed her at dusk last night, the 3 of us. The breeze soft as truth told on time. The channel lights clicked on one by one. Red, green, white. 3 lights, marking safe water, away home.